I was moving my lips. Everyone here? Hello, everyone. This is Cindy Hubert, and I'm with APQC. It's so nice to have you with me this morning, talking about one of my favorite topics, knowledge management. We're going to try time. Few sounds. Just a moment. Okay, I think the third time charm. We're getting a little bit of feedback. I don't want you to have that. Just a moment.
You're on mute. Make sure I'm on mute. Okay, I'm in no audio. And then
You ready? We're having sound difficulties this morning. We're gonna get there. All right. Finally, hello everyone. It's Cindy Hubert. We're going to get started eventually. Thank you all so much for joining me this morning, and I'm finally going to get to talk about one of my favorite topics, knowledge management. For some of you who have been joining these calls, we've been doing some knowledge management support calls throughout 2019, and we decided that they were so well received by our members and clients that we wanted to continue doing them, but we're going to change the format a little bit. Last year, we really focused in on the capability assessment tool and the APQC maturity model, the levels of KM maturity. We decided this year we'd get a little bit deeper into all the different capabilities. So for once a month, we're going to start looking at each capability in great detail. I think that'll be fun for both of us because a lot of times I look at them in a very broad view, but this time we're going to get a little bit deeper and just talk about each specific one. We'll do that at the very beginning. Today we're going to start at the beginning under the strategy category. We're going to start with objectives. And we'll go through that and talk about what that means at each level. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll get up a little bit higher level and look at the maturity model, talk about how it helps your organization as you're going through the various things that you do in knowledge management, advancing your KM program capabilities. And I think that'll give you a really good sense that on things that you may want to work in, hopefully we can define and look at some of the gaps you may be having in each of the capabilities. So again, thanks for joining, and we're going to get right into the topic of today, which is about setting objectives for your knowledge management program. So with that said, advance my slides here. For those of you who may not have seen our capability assessment tool, it's comprised of 4 main categories. Across those, it divides, goes into subsets of 12 different categories. You can see them aligned here. And under each one of them are a collection of statements that describes what you should be doing, experiencing in terms of attributes, behaviors, activities for each one of these 12 capabilities. And ultimately, if you look at our classic levels of 1 through 5, you'll see 146 capability statements across these 12 categories. So that's quite a lot to handle in one swoop. So today, we're really going to break down objectives and what that means. And just so you know, as we start talking about this, I want to make sure that you all know through your membership, we provide a lot of content around each one of these objectives, case studies, insights. We also help people with all of these things and pulling it together. So our services group at APQC comes to you and helps you do some of the things that you may be struggling with, accelerate some of the things you're doing, and help you keep you from making mistakes that we know can be made on a common basis. We want to get you there past all that so you can accelerate your efforts and really start adding value to the organization with your KM efforts. So with all of that said, let me dive into objectives and talk a little bit about what that means. So when people start talking about setting knowledge management objectives, a lot of the times they're just really trying to say, well, what is it we're trying to achieve? What is that big, view of and things that we're doing that we can align and measure against goals that we're trying to receive? But if you're just getting started, it looks a little bit different than it does for those knowledge management programs who are down the road a bit. So I want to take you through each of the levels and give you some really concrete examples that you can use for each level and think about. What we also find is people who are down the road that may be struggling, not getting the engagement that they want, either from senior leaders, sponsors, or even people, their partners in the business. It may be because people are not seeing the value proposition and your objectives may not be clearly stated. So let's break each one down, and what I'm going to show you is for each level of maturity, and remember the maturity assessment is based on 5 level maturities that aligns to our levels of knowledge management maturity model, and each one breaks down into capabilities. And so we're going to start at the lowest level, level 1, where people are just initiating their efforts and getting started. And what you can see here is that the 2 capability statements are fairly broad. The first one is just awareness and interest in KM is visible in parts of the organization. So you may see that people are saying things like, oh gosh, we know this is an organization. Where would I go to find this information? You may see a leader or a project team manager saying, oh my gosh, we have a need. We keep making the same mistake across our product life cycle. What are we doing wrong? Perhaps we need to capture lessons. And those are just very simple examples that you may be seeing, but that's what we see. And there's usually a wide variety of needs and interests that you see at a level 1, because you're really not just pinpointing and being targeted right at the beginning. But with that said, it's always good for you as a KM practitioner and a leader to be sure and spend some time with these people, having some dialogue, and really understanding the business need. Because one of the hardest things you'll do all through your journey of knowledge management is stay aligned to the business. And if you start out by really examining what the business needs are, what the problems that the business is having right now, you can begin to align yourself to those and be very specific when you set your objectives. So some of the most common reasons that we see people look at, starting with building the awareness and need, we see experts retiring. There's a lot of churn and movement in the organization, and there's a need to document the knowledge. That's a really big reason. Also, learning is typically a big deal. So people are moving, if there is a lot of churn in the organization and people are moving in roles in and out in that 1 to 2 to 3 year period, managers are seeing the need for accelerating the time to competency and learning. So that tends to be another very common objective we see. The other is what I mentioned already. The organization just keeps making the same mistakes. I had the opportunity to be with our friends with the Carrier Team 1 program for the U.S. Navy earlier this week, and they had one of their admirals talking, and he said very clearly, he said, learning is a good thing, relearning is not. And I have to absolutely agree with him and respect his statement, because it is true. We make the same mistakes, and that's not good. That's something that knowledge management can come in and take hold of. And then the one that I'm sure all of you hear so much is people simply cannot find the information that they need. They can't get to it. There's a challenge with accessing it. It may be there, but it may not be organized in a good sense. But as you see, all of these things are just signposts that perhaps a more formal approach to helping knowledge flow across the organization is required. So usually when people are taking this assessment, they are usually at the level 1 maturity. They can get through that pretty easily because by the time you're taking this assessment, you've recognized a lot of these things and probably some beyond. So let's talk about what objectives look like at maturity level 2. You can see that this gets a little bit more pointed, and it probably means that someone has taken notice that there needs to be more formality around knowledge management. There needs to be a leader, a small group that helps direct and guide with the support of a sponsor or a group of business leaders. So what you may see as objective statements, or we see as objective statements at level 2, is value creation is acknowledged, and that's that alignment to the business I was talking about. There may be things you recognize as knowledge flow underway, and you want to say, these are great examples of knowledge management. Let's get in and make it a little bit more robust and put some capabilities around them, like processes, approaches that will help people actually get their knowledge shared, published, shared, and transferred to another part of the organization so it can be used in the same context or not. And then the other thing that we see as a capability statement is people start recognizing the value of knowledge, and they really see knowledge, they begin to see knowledge as a strategic asset. And so a lot of documentation starts happening. You may start realizing that one of your objectives is to be able to get people to content, not just people to people, but people to content that they need. And so a lot of times content management becomes one of those capabilities that you see as a requirement, and that becomes an objective to say we really want to focus on that. So whatever it is, again, it's important at this level that as you begin to shape what the value looks like, that you really have some conversations with your leader. And that's what we look for in these statements. Again, what we may look like, and Darcy Lemons, who is our project manager for the knowledge management for the KM capability assessment tool, she will say when she starts looking for value creation, that starts looking like we have a group of leaders who have said, our knowledge needs to flow better. This is the type of knowledge that needs to flow. We need to capture lessons. Our question is always in what? And so those responses get very, very targeted, and you get very clear about what knowledge you really want to start enabling to flow across the organization. Again, what we would look for under projects is exactly that. There are probably people in your organization now, if you're just getting started, who have some things underway. And it's always a good time when you start looking at how are we demonstrating this capability to start looking at the various projects underway that you would classify as opportunities for knowledge management. And those are abundant. You will never be short of those projects. You just have to be really smart about which ones you choose to enable, because you're going to need resources, you're going to need capabilities, and you're going to need some level of sponsorship to help you move through this. So again, the alignment does not have to be as formal at this point, but it does need to recognize that we are not just doing knowledge management for knowledge management's sake, that we are doing things to really enable the business. And if you get this right the first time, you're not going to have to come back to it. You won't have as many missteps. Let me move to the next level. So level 3 gets a little bit more robust, you might say. And you can see that we start asking from the capability perspective for some very specific things. And we do this because this is where you really start getting organized around your knowledge management efforts. So we start asking in our capability statements for a vision and mission. So where are you going? If you've tried some pilots, if you've seen that you've had some opportunities, you've had those discussions at level 2, where are you going with all of this? And is it linked to some kind of value creation, whether that is in a team, a business group, a region, across manufacturing sites, whatever your scope is, you can look at it. And we have people who look very narrowly at business units, and that is fine. We have people who look enterprise-wide. I think one of the things we see most often is because people don't always have all the resources they need to go enterprise-wide, they'll start with that business unit, having that vision to say, we want to get a little bit broader, but here's where we're going to start our efforts. The second thing we start looking for in terms of objectives is a strategy and a roadmap. Because at level 3, we'll talk a little bit about this at the end, but level 3 is where you start to standardize and you start to be able to see consistency in your knowledge management processes, approaches, and the tools that you're using. You may not have one single platform, but you may start looking at the integration of those. And the strategy and roadmap just keep you marching in the right direction. It keeps, as you're bringing people on board and your efforts are expanding, they help you stay focused in all of this and continue to focus on what you're there to do, which is to help your knowledge flow. We start looking for examples of knowledge reuse within a domain or a business unit across the organization. And this is where we get pretty serious about having an approach that really targets what Darcy likes to call critical knowledge. So valuable discipline or business unit knowledge is identified, it starts being documented, captured, and standardized into those knowledge assets that people can use more broadly across your organization. So we start looking again at really, really specific things here. I mean, obviously, if you look at the first 2 capability statements in here, this is just making sure that the KM group has their efforts fully aligned to the organization and that it indicates that you've got senior leadership on board, because someone typically has to sign on this. It typically says you've got some sort of case for action where you're going to apply resources, you're going to partner with the business, and the roadmap then says once we show business value here, we're going to move to these other areas. And you'll see that as we come up in our maturity level 4 and 5 objectives along the way. In terms of tacit knowledge, because I think this is always an interesting point in any organization's life and your journey in KM, where you start recognizing the impact that both your explicit and tacit knowledge has. And your capabilities begin to get a little bit broader. Your objectives for those capabilities get broader because you don't always want to just have everything documented, but you want to make sure that knowledge flows through teams using things like networks, communities, tools to help people interact and communicate and innovate together to share and discuss with each other. So again, it's about not creating the wheel here. I think what's always important to remember in your objectives is knowledge management likes to create standards around their processes, approaches, and tools and give people what they need when they need their knowledge to flow. What you need to remember is your knowledge is unique across the enterprise. We're not trying to standardize all your knowledge. You can't do it. It's so different, and it's based on your work and what people are doing and how the organization runs. But knowledge management capabilities should be able to be applied to any area that knowledge needs to flow. And so if you remember in APQC's just classic knowledge flow, assuming knowledge is created, which it is all across the organization, there's a piece where you identify, you review that knowledge and make sure it's right and you want to push it out. You share that knowledge so people can access it. And of course, then there's the whole transfer and use piece. And that creates that full knowledge cycle that helps knowledge continue to grow and add value to the organization. All right, let's continue on. Yes, it always gets a little bit harder at these higher maturity levels. So I will tell you this, there's a little bit of a philosophical discussion that goes on at APQC with our members, because people are always striving to get to level 3. I'm going to share that with you in just a minute if you haven't seen that already. They always want to get to level 3 standardized for a lot of reasons. And then the question always is, well, do we go further? What should we do? And I will tell you this, if you share this with your senior leaders, they're going to say, we want to go all the way to the top. But I will tell you this, and Darcy and I have these conversations ever so often, and we both agree. You have to make that decision what is best for your business. You know, when you look at critical knowledge, how is it going to make a difference? And if it really is, and most of the time that answer is yes, then you may start really looking at what these objectives mean to your organization. So they're pretty straightforward when you look at them. You begin to align KM to some type of business framework, and that just gives it visibility. So people know what the vision, what the mission is of knowledge management, and they begin to understand their part in that. So your competencies and your infrastructure begin to increase to meet the demand. And your knowledge assets are beginning to be leveraged for competitive advantage. So let's talk about what that looks like and what type of examples we would be looking for. So a lot of times, we always say knowledge management needs to keep its own personality. And what do I mean by that? We've seen a lot of KM programs who respond to the needs of the business. They're reactive, they're moving quickly, and that's all good because you want to support the business needs. But a lot of times KM can lose its personality. If we see organizations who move KM from under strategy, where it got a lot of really broad views, into learning. Nothing wrong with that, but it begins to take on a learning personality, and you lose some of the broader capabilities that begin to help what knowledge management is supposed to do. The same with process improvement. While it certainly can be used in process improvement, aligning your knowledge in a knowledge map to a process and seeing where knowledge makes a difference, it's broader than that. So knowledge management wants to be there at the point of need, but it always wants to have that strategy and vision of where it's going and how it's helping the organization. So again, aligning to that enterprise business framework, it can go to a lot of places, but the big news is that it's transparent and you can see it. Competencies and infrastructure are always interesting. So competencies are really about not only the knowledge management team, the small core team. Notice I keep saying small core team, because the punchline comes when your business gets involved. That's when you know you're really partnering, because people in the business want their resources doing something and participating in the knowledge flow activities, whether that's helping identify and capture, SMEs reviewing and validating and sharing what that means for a deeper understanding, or just encouraging accessing knowledge and transferring it and using it. Those are things that are just continuous, and we find that organizations that really start embedding those competencies into the business and creating business advocates are the ones that have very robust programs that sustain and evolve over time. Infrastructure follows the demand, so don't get ahead of yourselves. I know everybody's really excited about all the emerging technologies. I don't know that they're emerging so much anymore, but they're here and we're using them. All the movement to Office 365, Google Docs, being able to collaborate online, easy to find content, better search features, data management, all of those things are important, but stay paced with your knowledge needs, because if technology gets too far out there, you may be at loss because your capabilities may not be being able to catch up. So keep that in mind. I also think, though, today's age, we used to say, oh, don't worry about the technology. I think you do have to worry about the technology because it can help you do so many things. We're seeing a lot of efforts around automation and how knowledge management can be a part of that. So I think if you've got really good competencies and people understand the knowledge requirements, and knowledge is a strategic asset, they understand the process flow of knowledge, then the capability of technology can come in and really enable that. And so we start looking at what those infrastructure needs look like. And then finally, knowledge assets are leveraged for competitive advantage. And I know if you're my friends out there in the government, you're saying, Cindy, competitive doesn't matter for us. But it does matter when you start talking about cycle time and productivity. And that can be your competitive advantage, is being able to stay very lean and mean and productive in times when needed. And so this just means that you are now able to take your knowledge and really take it to the next level and not use it just in the same context, but to use it in different contexts. And that is where you really begin to see your movement to maturity level 5 with your objectives, because innovation starts to occur. So at maturity level 4, you may experience some disruptions because you're so linked into the business, and the business disrupts a lot with all types of shifts that occur. But as you move into level 5, knowledge management really becomes part of everything that you do. It's talked about at your topmost senior level, and they really understand what it means to have a knowledge strategy, and they're very involved in setting direction around the knowledge. KM then begins to respond to what kind of infrastructure and competencies to support the capabilities that they have. And I think it's always important when we look at our organizations, our programs that we've watched through the years that move in and out of those maturity 4 and 5, because it's hard to stay there the entire time. Things change. World events happen, business events happen, and it's okay. But once you've had that foundation of 3, you can adapt to what the business needs are. As our friends at ConocoPhillips like to say, you can mirror the face of the business. So at level 5 is when you begin to understand how it really supports the overall excellence of the organization. It's aligned with the enterprise innovation efforts. And we're going to be talking a lot about that at APQC's conference, From Disruption to Innovation, and what that really means. But examples at this level are very sophisticated, and you see knowledge management deeply embedded. Knowledge management itself is almost an innovator because it begins to be proactive and really respond to the needs of the business with all capabilities in full force. And we've had very few level 5 organizations in the past. So it's always fun to look at them and see what they're doing to make tick. And I'll do a little plug for our upcoming conference because we're going to have quite a few people there and a few surprises along the way. All right, so hopefully this gives you a glimpse of what objectives look like and what those needs are. I encourage you to use the chat feature, because if there's something you'd really like to talk about or you have a question, Zakia is here with me, helping me monitor that. Okay, so let's go back big picture. So one capability, next month it will be about your business case. All right, so what do we want our organization to look like? I think this is, I've told you just one capability. Remember, there are 12 of them, and at some level you're trying to get all 12 operating on all cylinders. I think the punchline is level 3, because that's where you really begin to see a very tangible return on investment in a very broad way. We see anywhere from a 2-to-1 to a 5-to-1 return on investment, regardless of what you've invested in, as you begin to standardize. And as I said, when you look at those objectives where you have the strategy, the roadmap, the vision and mission, those are things that really start helping you build those common processes and approaches. You start striving towards that. The most important thing you can standardize at level 3 is your knowledge flow process. When people begin to understand, and I'm going to use a couple of different phrases that we hear, how to identify, capture, access, and use, or as our friends at the Navy likes to say, ask, improve, share. They adapted that from Shell's mantra of ask, learn, share. When you have everyone doing that, your capability, you've got people participating, because when they're asking, they're in a discovery mode. Where do I go? Do I go to our repositories to get the knowledge I need? Do I go to a knowledge sharing network or a community of practice to talk to experts and get their insights? Do I ask a question online in our chat features to get real-time information? There's a lot of mechanisms that allow people to be part of that flow, but they have to be aware of what that flow looks like, and you have to make it really simple for your users. So again, the maturity model is there to really set out where you're going. It is your journey when you look at this. And your journey, as I said, may take you up to level 5. We have seen people who have achieved level 4 and 5 whose KM program went away. That's a frightening thing. It doesn't happen often, but it's because business changes, a new leader comes in, and somewhere you begin to say, are you really, did you have it that deeply embedded? Because this is a journey, guys. It's not, you don't try to get there in 3 years and say, okay, we're here, it's done. It's not. It's a continuous journey, and that's why the objective category is so important, because it makes you think deeply about business value. And then you can begin to align all the other capabilities to go forward with that. Why do you want to do this? Get into a little bit. This is research from our accelerators of knowledge management maturity. What we see when people begin to assess their maturity levels, first of all, they get knowledge management very close to the flow of the work, which is what we see is 2 times more likely to embed KM in the business. They are then, as you see, 3 times more likely to enhance their KM capabilities across business units and to enhance their infrastructure and competency. We just talked about that. But look, it makes sense. It's so logical, because if you're doing those things and you're doing your alignment from at the very start, you'll have people coming with you, especially your leadership team. If you're showing value, they're going to start signing up to be part of your model and part of the partnership model. And again, the business case, which is going to support these objectives, is so important. And when you start seeing these things happen, you are more likely to create that business case that is very predictive on what we expect to see. So yes, knowledge managers, we must adhere to performance indicators, and those must start back at the beginning. They may be stories, you may start with some very simple participation measures, but you want to keep those going so you can start showing how the increase of people participating, downloading, it can be a lot of things for participation, coming to communities, downloading content, accessing experts, search features. Those are all great proxies for participation that then you can begin to link to the business value, and that starts moving you again up into those maturity levels. This is to give you just a little bit, for those of you who have not completed, and I have some of you on today that I think have actually completed our capability assessment. You know, it's not just a 15-question assessment. It's very deep. We're asking for examples of the statements I just shared with you. And then you get a great, robust benchmarking report back. You get it compared to all participants in our database, a peer group, regionally based, or looking at budget-wise, we can compare you against people about your size. So it gives you a great benchmarking report and a gap analysis. You can see your responses in a low, medium, and high quartile to begin to see how people are responding. And that puts a little bit of a competitive edge on it, I think, but also just to give you a clear picture about where you are. This is just to give you a demonstration of when you start aligning those objectives, and you'll see this for 3 of our organizations that we've worked with and learned from over the years, Floor, Schlumberger, and Merck. But when you see how they begin to set their objectives around their business needs, the value proposition, they were then able to clearly align their knowledge management approaches to impact those business needs. They set their objectives around that. Their infrastructure, their technological infrastructure supported that. And as you can see, they got results. And at a point in time for each of these, they achieved a level of maturity. And the results are quite significant. And knowledge management always wants to keep track of those and be able to say, we are doing this as a knowledge management organization supporting our business, and we have done this. Stories are always good. So a little bit about benefits. I do want to mention, if you are a member of APQC, a one-time per year use of the knowledge management capability assessment tool comes with your membership. So I encourage you to please use that. There's no sense in just letting it sit there and not go to use. it can help you do so many things. I've talked a lot about these, talking about the vision and establishing a shared picture of the game journey. I think it also serves as a great roadmap and can help you communicate. Here we are now, here's where our gaps, here's where we want to be. It's a great indicator. We have a lot of KM programs who will use the capability assessment as their indicator of progress, and that will be on their dashboard to be able to show that year after year. They may not take it every year, but certainly every other year. And it gives you a benchmarking opportunity to learn from other organizations and to advance your efforts. So speaking of learning from other organizations, so wow, last year we had our first year of APQC's Excellence in KM Award. I'm going to show you who those people were. Let me tell you a little bit about it, why we did it, and we have another group of organizations that we will be honoring this year and recognizing at our conference. So right now, to be eligible for the 2021 APQC Excellence in KM Awards, you would begin to submit your entries using the capability assessment tool by the end of this year. We award organizations at the enterprise or business level at level 3, 4, 5, and then we do quite a bit, not only to recognize these organizations, but to learn from them. So again, this year we will be recognizing a new group. I want to share with you who our group was, and they're still embargoed. We haven't announced them. They know who they are, but we haven't announced them as a group yet. These were our 2019 Excellence in Knowledge Management Award recipients. You can see we had 4 organizations at the enterprise level, and we had 5 at the business unit level, but the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers was not recognized as an enterprise, but they have 5 divisions that had achieved excellence in levels 3, 4, and 5 across the board. So we were very excited, and the learning has been the thing that I've appreciated the most. Well, one of the reasons we did this award was that we were getting views of all the great capability statements, the examples people were using, the pages and pages of documentation that you would send with that to showcase what you were doing, and we held all of that. We decided that we really needed to bring this to our membership so that our membership could see this as well. So for all of these organizations, or most of them, you will see case studies in our resource library. If you're a member, you can get to those. You will also see a lot of great examples from them in all of our articles and white papers that we have around best practices. And in fact, there is a great white paper, Setting Knowledge Management Objectives, is what this whole presentation was around, and it gives you very deep examples of what objectives look like, what people have done to set those objectives, and how to go about it. So I encourage you, again, the learning is very rich, and there's so much information there that can really help you advance your efforts if you're just getting started, or if you're re-energizing your program. Whether you're rethinking it, reimagining it, rebranding it, there's always an opportunity to do that. And these organizations have some great examples of how to go about doing that. They've all been on this journey for a while. So with that, I'm going to pause for a minute. I don't know that we have any questions or not. I'm going to give you a minute to do that before I do any kind of recap.
So Cindy, I did have a question come in about how you access the KM capability maturity assessment.
Absolutely. Shall I go on and do a live demo?
Sure.
Zakia always knows it's always risky when Cindy does a live demo. But you know what? You're just going to watch me do this. How's that? So we're going to go to apqc.org. That's easy to remember. Bunch of letters. Here we go. Okay, so you are now on, might I add, our new website. It's not that old, less than a year old. Thank you for first of all, thank you for the compliments on it. People who have used it a lot love it. And also thank you for the feedback, because you know, it's like any version of software you get, you work out bugs as you go. But I'm going to take you to, you can go a couple of places. You can go to the research library and do a keyword search under capability assessment. Or let me take you back, because the other really easy way to get there is through assessments. And you can see, and I'll go this direction just because it just goes right in front of you. And when you come down, again, you can select your topic, and it'll take you to view available assessments, and there it is. Now, be aware, we have a mini KM capability assessment. This is a 15 question. It'll give you a quick snapshot of where do we think you are, and it's all the way from getting started, you're well on your way, to you're pretty mature. If you're taking this and you're pretty mature, you need to move up to this comprehensive capability assessment. Now, this will give you all the information you need. This is open to members and non-members. They can go get that. And again, you can download it. You can get a sample report. You can read frequently asked questions. So there's an entire page that's devoted to this. There are some numbers to call, or you can email us that. I can assure you at some point along your journey in doing this, you will run into someone named Darcy Lemons, because she will be. This tells you where you can go. You can upload your file once you've taken it. And again, I'll just download the assessment once you see it. Yay. Okay, so for those of you not seeing it, oh my God, you're saying, oh my gosh, Cindy, why is it Excel-based? For many reasons. This is not, when you go into, let's just go into our objectives. So these are the things we just went through together. And so we ask you, when you start taking it, to score yourself. So if you have achieved this level, great, but now you must come over here and give us at least one example of how you have demonstrated achieving this capability. And it's not a regurgitation or a restatement of the capability itself. It's something very tangible. And so this is what typically takes longer. As you might imagine, if you are a level 1, 2, you may have some level 3 capabilities, may even have some level 4. But if you're truly just getting started or haven't really formalized your efforts, this will not take time to take. It will be fairly easy to do. But for those of you who are here and have a lot of examples, perhaps, it will take a little bit longer. And that's why we say it may take you up to 2 weeks of time to do that across various resources, because as you can see, there's various places that you can go. We do come in here, we have instructions for you, 1 page in terms of agreement that you will check. We also have a demographics page, and this is very important for you to complete for us, because it helps us then benchmark you against people who are like you within your peer group, within the size that you are. So you may want to make sure that you always do that. It also gives us your point of contact, because as we go through our validation process, there is usually some dialogue that happens. It's very rare that we get by without any dialogue happening. Once you've completed it, as I said, there was a link to where you turn it in off the website, and you can upload to this link. And then we will process, you'll go through a validation period. Again, Darcy and her team lead that. And then we process and send you a report. So the mechanics of it are fairly simple, fairly easy to use. Again, it takes your time, your effort to collect the benchmarking information that goes into this assessment. But it's a great audit. I really do encourage you all, if you have not used this before, and if you're just in the beginnings, if you really take this and say, I really want to find out what's going on across the organization in knowledge management, and you go find these things, you may be surprised at how many things you have going on that look like knowledge management activities and processes, but that are just not formalized under the umbrella of knowledge management. Sometimes that's a great place to start your pilot. Any others?
Cindy, thanks. No, I don't see any other questions that have come in. We'll give our audience just 1 second. If you do have one, raise your hand or put it in the Q&A and we'll get to it. If not, we can end our call for today.
And you'll be sending this. They'll get these. You'll
Absolutely.
get the materials. We thank you very much for joining me this morning, and Zakia. And we're going to be doing this every month to get deep inside. So give us your feedback. Would love that. What do you want more of? What do you want less of? Because you all were my pilot group to do this. So we appreciate all of you who joined us today. So looking forward, a quick reminder, I would love to see you in Houston, Texas in April, May timeframe. Our conference starts on April 29th and goes through May 1st, over at noon on May 1st, Central Standard Time. We have pre-conference workshops before then, so you have access to all of APQC's advisory services and expertise. They'll be leading those workshops, all things KM, and you can get a huge head start in terms of your knowledge, building your own skill set, and building your network, because you're going to need that throughout your journey. And for those of you who have joined us before, we have a whole great lineup coming up, lots of think tanks, lots of interactions with our Excellence in KM Award winners, and our keynotes are just phenomenal. So please go and look on our website for our conference, From Disruption to Innovation. That really describes KM for 25 years. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to seeing you again.